The galaxy had been at war for longer than most species could remember. The Veyron Concordance, an alliance of 12 alien civilizations, had spent 3,000 years fighting to survive against the Keth Dominion. The Keth were conquerors. They moved from world to world, taking everything they wanted and destroying everything they did not need. Billions had died under their rule. Entire planets had been burned to ash. In the great halls of Aethon Prime, the capital world of the Concordance, the leaders gathered for what many believed would be their final council meeting. The room was vast and ancient, built from white stone that seemed to glow with inner light. Representatives from all 12 species sat in a wide circle, their faces showing the same expression despite their different forms. Fear, exhaustion, despair. High Counselor Vathan stood at the center of the room. He was Ilori, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms. His people were known for their wisdom and patience, but even he could not hide his worry. The news from the front lines had been getting worse every day. The Keth had broken through their last major defense. There was nothing left between the enemy and their homeworlds. Admiral Kira then stepped forward to give her report. She was also Ilori, but her skin had turned pale from stress and lack of sleep. She had commanded the Concordance fleet for 20 years, and she had never known defeat like this. "The Meridian line has fallen," she said. Her voice was steady, but everyone could hear the pain behind her words. "We lost 3 full fleets in the engagement. 47,000 ships. The Keth suffered losses as well, but they have reinforcements coming. We do not." The room fell silent. 47,000 ships. It was a number too large to truly understand. Each ship had carried hundreds or thousands of crew members. Families had been destroyed. Entire generations had been wiped out in a single battle. "What remains of our forces?" Vathan asked. Kira then looked down at her datapad. 13 combat-capable vessels in the home defense fleet. Another 22 spread across our remaining territories, but they cannot reach us in time. The Keth will arrive at Aethon Prime within 2 standard cycles. 2 cycles, less than a month by human counting. That was all the time they had left. A diplomat from the Vestan species, a small creature covered in blue feathers, spoke up. "Surely there must be something we can do. Other allies we can call upon. Someone who might help us." Kira then shook her head. "We have contacted every known civilization in the galaxy. Those who are not already under Keth control have refused to get involved. They hope that by staying neutral, they will be spared. They will learn eventually that the Keth spare no one." Vathan closed his eyes. He thought about his children, his grandchildren, all the young lives that would end when the Keth arrived. He thought about the history of his people, the art and music and literature that would be lost forever. 3,000 years of civilization, ending in fire and darkness. It was then that old scholar Penthan raised his hand. He was the oldest member of the council, a historian who had spent his entire life studying the ancient records. Most of the other counselors considered him a relic, a creature of the past, with little to offer in times of war. But Vathan had always respected his knowledge. "There is one possibility," Penthan said slowly, "though I hesitate to mention it, because it is likely nothing more than myth." "Speak," Vathan commanded. "At this point, we will consider anything." Penthan activated his own datapad, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. The planet was covered mostly in water, with patches of green and brown land. 3,000 years ago, before the Keth rose to power, one of our scout ships made contact with a young species. They called themselves humans, and they came from this world. They called it Earth. Several counselors shifted in their seats. They had heard this story before, usually told as a cautionary tale about species that destroyed themselves before reaching maturity. The humans had just developed faster than light travel. Penthan continued. Our scout exchanged basic information with them and promised to return for formal diplomatic contact. But when the ship returned to their system 1 year later, there was no response to their signals. The humans had gone silent. Our people assumed they had destroyed themselves in war. Their records indicated a species with a strong tendency toward internal conflict. Kira then made a dismissive sound. "And you think these creatures, if they even still exist, would help us? A species that could not even stop fighting among themselves? I do not know, Penthan admitted. But I have spent many years studying those ancient records. The humans were unusual. They advanced technologically faster than any species we had ever encountered. In just a few thousand years, they went from simple tools to space travel. Their capacity for innovation was remarkable. Their capacity for violence was also remarkable, another counselor pointed out. The records show they nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times. Yes, Penthan agreed. But they did not destroy it. They came close, again and again, but they always pulled back from the edge. There is something in them, some stubborn refusal to give up, that kept them alive despite their own worst impulses. Vestan considered this. It was a thin hope, almost no hope at all. A species that had gone silent 3,000 years ago, probably long dead, possibly never advanced enough to help even if they had survived. And yet, what else did they have? Before he could speak, the doors to the council chamber burst open. A young communications officer ran inside, forgetting all proper protocol. Her eyes were wide, and her hands were shaking as she held up her data pad. "Counselors," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "We have received a transmission. From the outer rim of our territory. From a fleet." Vestan stepped toward her. "What fleet?" "All our forces are accounted for." The officer looked at him, and he saw something in her expression that he had not seen in a long time. It took him a moment to recognize it as hope. "They identify themselves as the United Earth Navy," she said. 200 warships. They say they have been watching the war for a very long time. They say they are ready now." She paused and swallowed hard. "They say they are here to help." The council chamber erupted into chaos. Counselors shouted questions, demanded confirmation, refused to believe what they were hearing. But Vestan stood perfectly still, staring at the young officer, feeling something strange stirring in his chest. The humans were not a myth after all. They had survived. And now, at the darkest moment in the history of the Concordance, they had finally arrived. The legends had been wrong about many things, but they had been right about one thing. When humans finally entered a fight, everything changed. Captain Daniel Morrison stood on the bridge of the UEN Valiant and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had served in the United Earth Navy for 30 years, training for a mission that most people on Earth did not even know existed. Now that mission was finally beginning. The Valiant was the flagship of the 1st Expeditionary Force. It was one of the largest ships ever built by human hands, nearly 2 kilometers long and carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Around it, 199 other warships held formation, waiting for orders. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and dreadnoughts. All painted in the gray and blue colors of the United Earth Navy. Commander Laura Simmons approached the captain's chair with a datapad in her hand. She was younger than Daniel, with short, dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been his second-in-command for 5 years, and he trusted her completely. "Sir, the Concordance fleet has arrived at the meeting coordinates," she reported. 13 ships. "They're holding position and waiting for us." Daniel nodded slowly. 13 ships. That's all that remains of their home defense fleet. According to their transmissions, yes. The rest were lost at something called the Meridian Line. Daniel had read the intelligence reports. He knew about the Meridian Line, knew about the billions who had died there, knew about the Keth advance that was now aimed directly at the Concordance homeworld. Earth's observers had been watching this war for 2 centuries, gathering information, studying both sides, preparing for the day when humanity would finally step onto the galactic stage. That day had come. "Signal all ships," Daniel ordered. "Maintain formation. We're going to introduce ourselves." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect coordination. 200 ships appeared in the void of space at exactly the same moment, their arrival synchronized down to the millisecond. It was a demonstration of precision that no other species in the galaxy could match. On the Concordance flagship, Admiral Kira then watched her sensor displays and felt her heart stop. She had been a military officer for 40 years. She had seen fleets of thousands of ships, but she had never seen anything like this. 200 vessels, her tactical officer whispered. His voice was shaking. Admiral, the energy readings from their weapon systems are unlike anything in our database. These ships are. I do not have words. Kira then said nothing. She was staring at the lead vessel, a massive gray ship that looked like it had been designed by someone who wanted to frighten enemies just by looking at it. Every line of its hull spoke of one purpose: war. A communication request appeared on her console. She accepted it with trembling fingers. The face that appeared on her screen was alien but somehow familiar. Soft skin, small eyes, flat features. The human looked calm, almost relaxed, despite the tension of the moment. Admiral Kira then, the human said in her own language. His accent was strange, but the words were clear. I am Captain Daniel Morrison, of the United Earth Navy. I understand your people are facing some difficulties. We would like to discuss how we might help. Kira then found her voice. Captain Morrison, I must confess, we did not expect. We did not know your species still existed. Daniel smiled. It was a small expression, just a slight movement of his lips. But Kira then found it strangely reassuring. We've been watching for a long time. Admiral. Waiting for the right moment. We believe that moment has arrived. Why? The question came out before Kira then could stop it. Why would you help us? We are strangers to you. The Keth have never threatened your territory. The human's expression grew serious. The Keth haven't threatened us yet. But they will, eventually. Species like them always do. We decided it was better to stop them now, alongside allies, than to wait until we had to face them alone. This was a practical answer, and Kira then understood it. But something in the human's eyes suggested there was more to the story. We would welcome you aboard the Valiant, Daniel continued. Your High Counselor as well, and anyone else you feel should be present. We have much to discuss, and not much time to discuss it. The meeting took place in a conference room aboard the human flagship. The room had been quickly modified to accommodate beings of different sizes and atmospheric needs. High Counselor Vathan noticed these preparations and appreciated the thoughtfulness behind them. 4 humans sat across the table from the Concordance delegation. Captain Morrison, Commander Simmons, a diplomat named Kevin Park, and a military strategist called Colonel Monica Reyes. They moved differently than the species Vathan knew. There was a constant alertness to them, a readiness for action that seemed built into their very bones. You must forgive our confusion, Vathan began. Your species made contact with us 3,000 years ago. Then you disappeared. We assumed you had perished. Kevin Park, the diplomat, leaned forward. He had a friendly face and an easy manner, but his eyes were clever. We didn't perish, Counselor. We just weren't ready. When your scout ship found us, humanity was still divided into hundreds of competing nations. We were more interested in fighting each other than exploring the stars. What changed? Kira then asked. We grew up, Colonel Reyes answered. She was a serious woman with dark skin and gray streaks in her hair. Slowly, painfully, but we grew up. We unified our planet. We built a real space fleet, and we started watching what was happening in the rest of the galaxy. Commander Simmons pulled up a holographic display showing the current galactic map, Concordance territory in blue, Keth Dominion in red, and the expanding crimson tide that had swallowed world after world. We've been studying the Keth for almost 200 years, she explained. Their tactics, their technology, their psychology. We knew that eventually they would become a threat to Earth, so we prepared. Vathan studied the display. You prepared for 2 centuries? While billions died? Daniel Morrison met his eyes directly. Yes, and I won't pretend that was an easy choice, but humanity learned something important from our own history. Rushing into a fight unprepared usually makes things worse. We needed time to build the right tools, train the right people, develop the right strategies. Now we're ready. Ready for what, exactly? Kira then demanded. Monica Reyes smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Ready to show the Keth what happens when they pick a fight with the wrong species. We've developed specific countermeasures for every weapon system they have. Our ships are faster and tougher than theirs. Our soldiers are trained for exactly this kind of war. Our men. She paused and looked around the table at the assembled aliens. We don't believe in fair fights, she said. We believe in winning. And we intend to win this war. With your help or without it. The only question is whether you want to be there when we do. Vathan looked at Kira then. The Admiral's expression had changed. The despair was gone, replaced by something new. Something that looked almost like hope. We want to be there, Vathan said quietly. Tell us what you need from us. The planning sessions lasted for 3 days. During that time, Admiral Kira then learned more about humans than the Concordants had discovered in 3,000 years of wondering about them. Some of what she learned amazed her. Some of it frightened her, and some of it gave her hope for the first time since the war began. The humans worked constantly. They seemed to need less sleep than any species Kira then had encountered, and they used their waking hours with fierce efficiency. Colonel Reyes led the tactical planning, spreading holographic maps across the conference table and moving ship formations around, like pieces in a game. She had studied every Keth battle from the past 2 centuries and found weaknesses that Concordant strategists had missed entirely. The Keth rely heavily on their numerical advantage, she explained during one session. They throw ships at problems until the problems go away. Their individual captains have little initiative. They follow orders from their command structure without question. This has always been their strength, Kira then pointed out. Their coordination is perfect. Monica nodded. Perfect coordination is a strength when everything goes according to plan. But what happens when the plan falls apart? What happens when their commanders are dead and their ships are scattered? They panic. They retreat. They don't know how to adapt. She pulled up recordings of Keth battles, pointing out moments when sudden changes in the fighting had caused confusion in enemy ranks. The Concordants had noticed these moments too. But they had never been able to take advantage of them. They did not have the aggressive tactics, or the fast ships needed to exploit brief windows of opportunity. The humans, it seemed, had both. While the military officers planned their campaign, diplomat Kevin Park spent his time learning about Concordance culture and politics. He asked questions constantly, listened carefully to the answers, and took detailed notes on his datapad. Some counselors found his curiosity annoying, but Vathan appreciated it. Your people are very interested in us, Vathan observed during a quiet moment. Kevin smiled. We're interested in everyone. Humans are curious by nature. We can't help ourselves. When we see something new, we want to understand it. Even when you are about to fight a war? Especially then. Kevin's expression grew serious. We've learned that you can't fight effectively for people you don't understand. We need to know what we're protecting. We need to know why it matters. This answer surprised Vathan. He had assumed the humans were helping for purely practical reasons, to protect their own territory from future Keth expansion. But Kevin's words suggested something deeper. Something more personal. Why does it matter to you? Vathan asked. You have no history with us. Our survival or destruction makes little difference to Earth. Kevin was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Did your historians tell you much about human history, counselor? Some. They said you were a violent species, that you nearly destroyed yourselves several times. That's true. We fought wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over differences that seem meaningless now. Millions died. Entire civilizations were wiped out. Kevin met Vathan's eyes. We did terrible things to each other, things that still shame us today. Then why should we trust you? Because we learned. Kevin's voice grew stronger. Every terrible thing we did taught us something about ourselves. We learned that violence without purpose is just destruction. We learned that hatred creates more problems than it solves. We learned that the only way forward is to build things, to protect things, to choose something better than revenge and conquest. He gestured toward the window, where human warships floated silently among the stars. Those ships out there were built by people who remember what we almost lost. They're crewed by men and women who grew up hearing stories about our darkest times. We don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight because we know what happens when good people do nothing. We've seen it. We've lived it. And we decided we would never let it happen again. Not to us, and not to anyone else. Vestan considered these words carefully. He had met many species in his long life, and most of them fought for simple reasons: survival, territory, resources. But the humans seemed to be fighting for something else entirely. They were fighting for an idea, and that, Vestan thought, might make them the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. The day before the battle, Captain Daniel Morrison walked through the corridors of the Valiant, speaking with his crew. He knew every section of the ship, every station, every face. These were his people, and tomorrow many of them would die. He found Commander Simmons in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Never can, before a big fight." Daniel stood beside her, looking out at the darkness. "Are the crew ready?" "And as ready as they'll ever be. Morale is high. Everyone believes in the mission." "And you? Do you believe in it?" "And," Laura was quiet for a moment, "I've been thinking about what we're doing here. We've been preparing for this war my entire life. Training, building, planning, but now that it's actually happening, I keep asking myself, what if we're wrong? What if we can't win?" Daniel nodded slowly. "We might not win. The Keth have beaten every opponent they've ever faced. They have more ships than us, more experience, more resources. On paper, we should lose. That's not very encouraging, sir." "I'm not finished." Daniel turned to face her. "The Keth have never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. They don't know how we think, how we adapt, how we refuse to give up even when everything seems lost. They've conquered species that surrendered when the odds turned against them. But humans don't surrender. We dig in. We fight harder. We find ways to win that our enemies never expected." He looked back at the stars. "Tomorrow, we're going to show the Keth something they've never seen before. We're going to show them what happens when they push too far. And even if we don't win, even if we fail, we're going to make them pay such a terrible price that they'll think twice before ever threatening another civilization again." Laura smiled despite herself. "You sound almost excited, sir." Daniel shook his head. "Not excited, determined. There's a difference." He paused. "Get some rest, Commander. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." He walked away, leaving Laura alone with the stars. She stayed there for another hour, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 3,000 years of silence, 2 centuries of preparation, and now, humanity was finally stepping into the light. Tomorrow, the legends would find out if they had been right about humans all along. The Keth Armada arrived at Aethon Prime exactly when the Concordance had predicted. 400 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their dark hulls blocking out the stars like a spreading shadow. At their center flew the command vessel of Supreme Commander Vethkal, a massive ship bristling with weapons. The pride of the Dominion, Vethkal studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. His scouts had reported the pathetic state of the Concordance defenses. 13 ships. 13 ships against 400. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. "Begin the advance," he ordered. "Destroy their fleet, then commence bombardment of the planet. I want this finished within 1 cycle." His officers moved to obey. The Keth Armada began its slow approach toward Aethon Prime, weapons charging, targeting systems locking onto the handful of Concordance vessels that stood between them and their prize. And then the trap was sprung. 200 human warships appeared from behind the planet's largest moon, where they had been hiding with their engines cold and their systems dark. They came in fast, faster than anything the Keth had ever encountered, their formations spreading out like the fingers of a giant hand reaching to grasp the enemy fleet. On the bridge of the Valiant, Captain Daniel Morrison watched the Keth reaction with grim satisfaction. Their perfect formation was already beginning to break apart as individual ships tried to respond to this unexpected threat. "All ships, execute pattern Sigma," he ordered. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "Carriers, launch all fighters. Destroyer squadrons, begin flanking maneuvers. Dreadnoughts, hold formation, and wait for my command." The human fleet moved as one, each ship knowing exactly where it needed to be and what it needed to do. From the Concordance flagship, Admiral Kira then watched in amazement. She had never seen such coordination, such precise timing, such perfect discipline. "Impossible," her tactical officer whispered. "No fleet can move like that." The first wave of the attack came from the human carriers. Thousands of small fighter craft poured into space, each one controlled by an artificial intelligence that could process information and make decisions faster than any organic pilot. They swept through the Keth formation like a swarm of angry insects, targeting sensor arrays and communication nodes, blinding the enemy and cutting their ships off from each other. The Keth tried to respond, but their weapons were designed to fight other capital ships, not tiny craft that moved too fast to track. Their commanders screamed orders into communication systems that no longer worked, trying to coordinate a defense against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. While the fighters caused chaos, the human destroyers struck at the enemy flanks. They came in pairs, working together with the smoothness of long practice. One ship drawing fire, while the other delivered killing blows. Commander Eric Santos led the attack from the bridge of the UEN Defiant, his voice steady as he called out targets for his squadron. "Focus fire on that cruiser's engines. Good hit. Now break left and re-engage. Watch for incoming fire from the battleship at bearing 270. The Defiant shuddered as enemy weapons struck her shields, but Eric barely noticed. He had trained for this moment his entire career. He knew his ship, knew his crew, knew exactly how much punishment they could take and still keep fighting. And he knew something else too, something the Keth would never understand. Humans did not retreat just because they were taking damage. They pressed forward. They made the enemy pay for every wound. On the surface of Athon Prime, the first wave of human Marines landed in the capital city. Sergeant Nathan Cole led his squad through streets made of crystal and light, securing defensive positions alongside Concordance ground forces, who had never seen humans before today. "Contacts ahead," Corporal Katie Wells reported, her weapon tracking movement at the end of the street. "Keth advance party. 12 hostiles." Nathan assessed the situation in less than a second. The Keth warriors were big, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in hard shells and armed with powerful energy weapons. They had conquered 100 worlds with their strength and ferocity, but they had never fought humans. Wells, Rodriguez, suppressing fire. Davis, flank left. Everyone else, follow me. The squad moved with perfect coordination, each Marine knowing exactly where to be and what to do without needing to be told. Wells and Rodriguez opened fire, forcing the Keth to take cover. Davis circled around to their left, cutting off their escape route, and Nathan led the rest of his people straight up the middle, closing the distance before the enemy could react. The fight lasted less than a minute. When it was over, 12 Keith warriors lay dead in the Crystal Street, and Nathan's squad had not lost a single soldier. A Concordance officer approached, his face showing something between shock and awe. "How did you do that?" "Those were elite Keth warriors. They have never been defeated so easily." Nathan shrugged. "We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We got good at it." He checked his weapon and looked up at the sky, where the battle still raged among the stars. "Now we get to use those skills for something worthwhile." In orbit, the tide of battle was turning. The Keith fleet had lost nearly a quarter of its ships, and their formation had collapsed into chaos. Individual captains fought desperately, but without coordination from their command ship, they were just targets. Colonel Monica Reyes, coordinating the battle from the Valiant, saw the opportunity she had been waiting for. "The enemy flagship's escorts have been destroyed. Their shields are weakening. If we can take out their command vessel, the rest of the fleet will fall apart." Daniel nodded. "Signal Commander Santos. Tell him it's time." Eric Santos received the order and felt a cold calm settle over him. The plan called for his destroyer squadron to make a direct assault on the enemy flagship, a suicide run through the heart of the Keth formation to take out the ship's shield generators. It was the most dangerous mission of the battle, and he had volunteered for it without hesitation. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced. "We're going in. It's going to be rough, but I want you to know that I'm proud of every single one of you. Now let's show these aliens what humans are made of." The Defiant and her sister ships accelerated toward the enemy flagship, weaving through a storm of weapons fire that would have destroyed any other vessels. The Defiant took hit after hit, her hull breaching in a dozen places, but she kept coming. They emerged on the other side of the Keth formation, trailing fire and debris. But behind them, the enemy flagship's shields flickered and died. "Target exposed," the tactical officer reported. "Dreadnoughts have firing solutions." Daniel Morrison did not hesitate. "All dreadnoughts, fire main batteries, destroy that ship." 12 human dreadnoughts fired simultaneously. Their weapons were the most powerful ever built by human hands, designed specifically for this moment. The Keth command vessel, pride of the Dominion, vanished in a cascade of blinding light. The enemy fleet, suddenly leaderless, began to fall apart. Some ships fled into faster-than-light travel, desperate to escape. Others fought on blindly, unable to retreat, until human weapons silenced them forever. By the time the sun rose over Aethon Prime, the battle was over. The Concordance had won its first victory in decades, and the galaxy had learned that the legends about humans were not just stories after all. The war lasted another 3 years after the Battle of Aethon Prime, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. The Keth had built their empire on the assumption that no one could stand against them. When humans proved that assumption wrong, the foundations of everything they had built began to crumble. Human industrial capacity proved to be something the galaxy had never seen before. Earth's factories, designed and refined through centuries of terrestrial warfare, could produce warships faster than the Keth could destroy them. For every human vessel that fell in battle, 2 more took its place. For every soldier who died, 10 more graduated from training academies back on Earth. The Dominion had conquered species that gave up when the situation seemed hopeless. Humans, it turned out, only fought harder when things looked bad. The tactics that Colonel Monica Reyes had developed during her years of planning proved devastatingly effective. Human fleets struck at Keth supply lines, communication nodes, and shipyards, cutting the enemy empire into pieces that could be destroyed, one by one. Concordance forces, inspired by their new allies and equipped with human technology, fought alongside them with renewed determination. Captain Daniel Morrison was promoted to admiral after the victory at Aethon Prime. He spent the next 3 years leading the combined fleet from one engagement to the next, watching as the red stain of Keth territory on the galactic map slowly shrank and disappeared. It was brutal, exhausting work. He lost friends, lost ships, lost count of the lives that ended under his command. But he never wavered, and neither did his people. The final battle took place in orbit above the Keth homeworld. It was a smaller engagement than many that had come before. The Dominion's once mighty fleet reduced to a handful of ships protecting their last remaining territory. Supreme Commander Vethkal had died at Aethon Prime, and his successors had proven far less capable. When human dreadnoughts took up position around their world, the Keth did something they had never done before in their entire history. They surrendered. Admiral Morrison accepted the surrender in person, standing on the bridge of the Valiant as Keth officials transmitted their formal declaration of defeat. He felt no joy in the moment, no sense of triumph. He felt only exhaustion, and a profound relief that the dying could finally stop. The peace negotiations were complicated. Some members of the Concordance wanted to destroy the Keth entirely, to make sure they could never threaten the galaxy again. Their anger was understandable. The Keth had murdered billions, enslaved countless worlds, committed atrocities that would be remembered for generations. They deserved no mercy, but humanity took a different position. Vengeance creates more enemies than it destroys, Admiral Morrison explained to the Concordance Council. We've learned that lesson too many times to repeat it. If we destroy the Keth now, we become no better than they were. We become the very thing we fought against. The final treaty was harsh, but not cruel. The Keth were required to disarm completely, to pay reparations to every world they had conquered, and to accept the presence of peacekeeping forces on their territory for the next century. Their leaders faced trial for their crimes. Their military was disbanded. But their species was allowed to survive, to rebuild, to find a new way forward. It was more than the Keth deserved, but it was what humans believed was right. In the years that followed, humanity took its place among the stars. Earth joined the Concordance as its 13th member, and human colonies began spreading across the galaxy. They brought with them their strange music and their confusing sense of humor, their love of competition and their stubborn refusal to accept any problem as unsolvable. The other species found humans difficult to understand. They were aggressive but also kind, violent but also gentle, capable of terrible destruction and beautiful creation. In equal measure, they formed friendships easily, argued passionately, and seemed to find meaning in helping others even when there was no obvious benefit to themselves. High Counselor Vathan, in the final address of his long career, tried to explain what the galaxy had witnessed. For 3,000 years, we believed humans were a myth, he said, standing before the assembled representatives of 13 species. We thought they were a cautionary tale, a species too fierce to survive, too aggressive to build anything lasting. We were wrong about everything. He paused, looking out at the faces watching him. Humans survived because they learned from their mistakes. They built because they refused to repeat the errors of their past. And when the moment came, when the galaxy needed them most, they did not hesitate. They came to fight, not for territory, not for power, not for revenge, but because they believed it was right. He smiled, an expression that the other species had learned from their human friends. I asked one of them once why they came to help us. She was a soldier, a young woman who had fought in a dozen battles. She told me something I will never forget. She said, "Because we remember what it's like to be alone. And we decided no one else should ever have to feel that way." On Earth, in a small town in Kansas, a woman named Samantha Cole sat on her front porch and read a letter from her brother Nathan. He had stayed with the peacekeeping forces after the war, stationed on a distant world she could not pronounce, helping former enemies learn to live in peace. His letters came slowly across the vast distances of space, but they always arrived eventually. He wrote about the strange beauty of alien sunsets, about the friends he had made among species whose names sounded like music, about a galaxy slowly healing from centuries of war. He wrote about hope, about change, about a future that seemed brighter than any generation before them could have imagined. Samantha finished the letter and looked up at the night sky. The stars looked the same as they always had, but she knew now that they were not just points of light. They were destinations. They were possibilities. They were proof that humanity had found its place in something bigger than itself. 3,000 years ago, a scout ship had found Earth and promised to return. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had wondered what happened to the strange, violent, fascinating species that lived there. Now they knew. Humans had not destroyed themselves. They had grown. They had learned. They had become something more than any legend could describe, and they had only just begun. The stars waited, patient and eternal, for whatever humanity would do next. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, aboard a ship crewed by beings who had once been strangers and were now friends, a human voice was laughing at a joke that no other species quite understood. But they were learning. Just as humanity had learned, just as everyone, together, was learning to build something better than what had come before. The myth had become reality. And the reality, it turned out, was even more remarkable than the stories had ever imagined.